Hi, how y'all doing? My name is Lauren. I am a PhD chemist and I am on a no-buy 2026. So today we're going to be doing my makeup inventory. So that's where I'm going to be showing you everything that is currently in my collection for my makeup, minus my eyeshadow palettes and singles and things of that nature, because it just got too overwhelming to do it all in this one video. So I can come back and do an eyeshadow palette video. Apologies for the change of background in today's scene, but I needed to be in front of my computer so that way I can keep up with all of the statistics that I worked on. So you're just gonna have to deal with a little bit of a different lighting situation for today. Hopefully this is okay, but I'll be scooching over pretty soon to give the majority of the screen to all of the graphics that'll be popping up anyway. So shouldn't be seeing too much of me for too much longer. But I just want to start off by saying that we're going to go through each of my categories. In each of my categories, I do want to say that I am including any backups that I have. I also do count minis as a full product, and each one will be separated based on the category, and I'll give you the statistics for each one of those as we go through them. So now I'm just going to get into it and we can get started with the very first thing. So I'm going to scooch to the side and give a little bit more room. Okay, so you should be seeing a pie chart that has the percentages of each of my categories. So as you can clearly see, I separated them, and blushes is by far and away my biggest category. I have quite a few of them, but we'll get into that as we continue. And then it goes down from there. I have quite a few in the lip category as well, which I did separate into each individual lip as I categorize it, such as an oil, a gloss, a clicky stick, or lip balm, so on and so forth. So I didn't have the heart to actually combine those into one category because that would be quite depressing, the amount that I have, so I separated them. Moving on to the first category that I'm going to show, so you should be seeing a picture of all of my primers now. For reference, there are a few that I had to go back and add additional ones in, but I wasn't going to retake the photos just because it took quite a bit of time to put everything together. So those typically have the added in text to show you what is missing. But in the primer category, I have 23 primers, so those are the ones that you're seeing there. And now we'll move on to the statistics. Okay, so starting at the top, starting 2025, I had 8 primers. On January 1st, 2025, that's when I started taking my statistics. And then in 2025, I purchased 5 new primers, and I ended up using 6 primers total in 2025, and I decluttered 2 of the primers that I had in 2025. Now you will see that in 2026 I have remaining 23. So there's a little bit of a caveat in this category. I now include my eyeshadow primers in this category, so you can see on that bottom line there are 4 that I consider eyeshadow primers. So that NARS pot I use purely as an eyeshadow primer, not as a concealer, as well as the Sigma stick and the Pat McGrath Intensifies. I did also start including my mixers into this category as well. So the e.l.f. Halo Glow and the few of the BB creams, so on and so forth, I decided to include here, as well as that St. Jane primer, which was originally a sunscreen, but I use it more as a primer than a sunscreen. So that's why the numbers don't exactly match for that. For those who love statistics, like I love statistics, this is another pie chart that you should be seeing. So if you start in the upper right, what you're going to see first is that out of my 2025 inventory, I used up 75% of that inventory in 2025. I also decluttered 25% of that inventory, but then the downward spiral is that in 2026, my overall inventory grew 287.5% from what it started at the beginning of 2025. Now, again, that is a caveat because I brought in things that I didn't keep under this category at the beginning of 2025, but you will see that I did purchase 21.74% of my inventory in 2025. So this is a category that has grown quite exponentially. Next, you're going to be seeing a picture of all of my concealers. I have 9 in total at the beginning of 2026. So moving on to the statistics, I had 8 at the beginning of 2025 whenever I did my count. And then I purchased 4 new concealers within the span of 2025. I used to completion 2 of them. I decluttered 2 of them. And then in 2026, I have 9 concealers remaining. So again, that number is not going to work out statistically, and that is because I started keeping my under eye correctors in this category as well. So that is that e.l.f. Peach corrector as well as the Tom Ford corrector. So that is what is throwing those numbers off. Next, for the pie chart, you'll see that I used to completion 25% of my original inventory in 2025. I decluttered 25% of my original inventory in 2025. And then this category also went up. So I have 112.5% more in this category than what I started with in 2025. So 44.44% were purchased within 2025 to allow me to increase this category above what I had starting. Next category that I want to talk about is going to be foundations. So I have 18 foundations overall to start on January 1st, 2026. Going into the statistics for these, starting at the beginning of 2025, I had 20 foundations in total. I purchased 4 foundations over the course of the year last year. I used 3 foundations and then I decluttered 3 foundations from my inventory. And the ones that I have remaining at the start of 2026 are 18. So again, for statistics, that means that I used up 15% of my starting inventory in 2025. I decluttered 15% of my starting inventory in 2025. And then as of January 1st, 2026, this is a category that has gone down. So I have 90% remaining of that category from where I started in 2025. And 22.22% of it was purchased over the year. Moving on to my powders. So I have 8 powders in total, although the one on the top row far right is actually a combination. So it has a loose powder on the bottom and a pressed powder on top, but I'm only going to count it as one powder. So for the statistics for this one in 2025, I started off with 6 powders total. I purchased 5 additional powders in 2025. I used to completion 1 of them, and then I ended up decluttering 2 of them. So at the beginning of 2026, I have 8 powders remaining. So for percentages, I used 16.67% of my inventory in 2025. I decluttered 33.33% of my inventory. I increased this category by 33.33% to get to 133.33% of where I started in 2025 for where I am in 2026. So that means that I purchased 50% of that in 2025. Bronzers is the next category that I want to talk about. So for bronzers, I have 17 bronzers starting on January 1st, 2026. I will say that the Give Beauty bronzer, 4th on the top row, is actually a duo. So it has a powder and a cream, but I will only be using the cream because the powder is not a color that works for me. So going through my numbers for 2025, In the beginning of 2025, I had a total of 8 bronzers, and then over the course of 2025, I purchased 12. So this is a category in particular that blew up for me. I finished 0 over the course of the year, and I ended up decluttering 3. So that brought my total at the beginning of 2026 to 17 bronzers. As for the statistics, that means that I used up 0% of my inventory from 2025. I decluttered 37.5% of my inventory from 2025. And then I brought in a whopping 112.5% more than what I started in 2025. So as you can see, that puts my 2026 remaining total to 212.5%. Out of the total bronzers that I own in 2026, you can see that this shows that I bought 70.59% of them in 2025. So that is a very ugly statistic to have to look at, and one that I'm hoping to curb in the future. Moving on to my blushes, I separate them into creams and liquids versus powder. So we're going to go over cream and liquid blushes first. So there should be a graphic that shows all of those. I have 61 total cream and liquid blushes, and going over the numbers for that, I also have 40 total powder blushes. So I'm going to count these together as one blush category, but I did want to show them separately whenever I took the photos because there was just too many to include in one photo. But blushes overall, I started 2025 with 42 blushes. I purchased 74 blushes over the course of the year. Just wrap your head around that number. 74 blushes. Yep. I used a total of 1 blush throughout the course of 2025. And I did end up decluttering 14 of them. And that brought my total at the beginning of 2026 to 101 blushes. That is more than I believe anyone could use in a lifetime, but here we are, and hence the reason that propelled me down this No Buy 2026. So looking at the statistics, I used 2.38% of my starting inventory in 2025. I decluttered 33.3% of my starting inventory in 2025, but I brought in 140.48% more than what I started off 2025 with to begin 2026. And out of the 100% of blushes that I own in the beginning of 2026, 73.27% of those were purchased in 2025. That was a very hard number for me to sit with. And again, one of the reasons why I am doing this No Buy 2026. Next category is going to be highlighters. So as you see here, I have 47 highlighters. Again, I just count components. I don't count each individual highlighter within the components because quite a few of them have more than one highlighter within them. So I started 2025 with 19 highlighters. I purchased 36 highlighters over the course of 2025. I used to completion 0 highlighters, and I decluttered 8 of the highlighters that I own. So starting January 1st, 2026, I now own 47 highlighters. The statistics for that is that I used 0% of my starting inventory in 2025. I decluttered 42.11% of my starting inventory in 2025. But as of January 1st, 2026, I have 247.37% of where I started in 2025. And of that 2026 remaining, 76.6% was purchased in 2025. Next is setting sprays. So I have 8 in total, although 2 of them are the minis that you see in the top left. So I started 2025 with 3 setting sprays. I purchased 7 over the course of the year. I finished 2, and I decluttered 0. So at the beginning of 2026, I have 8 setting sprays remaining. That means that in 2025, I used 66.67% of my starting inventory. I decluttered 0%, but this is another category that has gone up to a total of 266.67% of where I started in 2025, with 87.5% of that total being bought in 2025. Moving on to mascaras, I have 19 mascaras in total. 7 of those are mini mascaras that you see on the top row, and then on the bottom row far left is a lash primer, which I'm going to include with my mascaras again. For the total numbers, I started 2025 with 14 mascaras. I brought in 17 mascaras over the course of 2025. I used up 7 mascaras and I decluttered 5 over the course of the year. That means that for 2026, I now have 19 mascaras to start off the year. Those statistics show that I used 50% of my inventory in 2025. I decluttered 35.71% of my starting 2025 inventory, and this is yet another category that has grown to 135.71% of where I started 2025, with 89.47% of that total remaining in 2025 being bought in 2025. Sorry, the total remaining in 2026 being bought in 2025. Next is brow products. So I have 7 brow products to start the year, so you can see those in the graphic shown. Going over the numbers, I started 2025 with 6 brow products. I brought in 8 over the course of the year. I used to completion 3 brow products, and I decluttered 4 over the course of 2025. And that means that starting in 2026, I have 7 brow products remaining. So for those statistics, I used 50% of my starting inventory in 2025. I decluttered 66.67% of my starting inventory. And in 2026, I have 116.67% remaining from my start of 2025 inventory to my start of 2026 inventory. So this is yet another category that has grown. Face palettes are not something that I use very often, so I try to keep them at a minimum. Therefore, I currently only own 3 face palettes, although I will say that one of them is a blush palette, but I keep it with all of my face palettes just because it is bigger, it doesn't fit in my blush drawer, and that's just what fits in my routine. Starting 2025, I had 3 face palettes in total. Over the course of 2025, I purchased 3 new face palettes. I used up 0 face palettes over the course of 2025, and I decluttered 3 face palettes over the 2025, bringing me even to my remaining in 2026 being 3. So those statistics are pretty easy to work out. So I used up 0% of them. I decluttered 100% of what I started the year with. I brought in 100% of what I started the year with. And remaining, I have, again, 100% of what I started the year with. So pretty easy statistics there. Apologies if I moved around a bit. I realized that I needed to grab something to drink. I did not realize how long this video was going to be. So moving on to eyeliners, I have 34 in total. You'll see that in the graphic now. Going over the numbers in 2025, I started with 21 total eyeliners. I purchased 23 over the year. I used 1 eyeliner to completion, and I decluttered 9 of them, typically because they had dried out and gone bad. That means that in 2026, I had 34 remaining eyeliners. So I used 4.76 of my beginning inventory in 2025. I decluttered 42.86%, and in the beginning of 2026, I now have 161.9% of my beginning 2025 inventory. With, out of that percentage of 2026, 67.65% had been brought in the year of 2025. For lip liners, I have the 18 that you see on the screen now. I'm not one to use them very often, so I try not to keep too many around, but 18 is already a lot. So going over those numbers, I started 2025 with 14. I purchased 5 over the course of the year. I used 0 and I decluttered 1 of them. It was not my color. So that means at the beginning of 2026, I have 18 remaining. And for those statistics, again, I used 0% of my starting inventory. I decluttered 7.14% of my starting inventory. And in 2026, I have 128.57% of what I started 2025 with. And of the total that I have in 2026, 27.78% were purchased in 2025. Now on to the lip category. As you'll see, I have a couple there on the bottom that are just written in, so I do not currently have those in my collection. Those are what I keep at work, but I have 26 totals shown on the screen. So for those numbers, I started out 2025 with 21. I purchased 6 over the course of the year. I used 0 and I decluttered 1 of them. And so that brings my remaining total in 2026 to 26. For those statistics, I used 0%, I decluttered 4.76%, and yet again, this is another category that has grown to 123.81% of where it started in 2025. So of my starting inventory in 2026, I purchased 28.57% of that in 2025. Lip glosses, I have 46 total lip glosses. So I started the year in 2025 with 48 lip glosses. I purchased 23 over the course of the year. I used 10 and I decluttered 15. So this is one of the few categories that you will see that I actually go down. So in 2026, I have 46 remaining lip glosses. So that means that I used 20.83% of my starting inventory in 2025. I decluttered 31.25% of my starting inventory in 2025. And the remaining that I have in 2026 is 95.83%, with that percentage of 2026 that I bought in 2025 being 50% total. For lip oils and lip stains, I have the 27 that you currently see on the screen. I started out 2025 with 7. I brought into my collection 25 over the course of the year. I used 1 and I decluttered 4. That means for the start of 2026, I have the 27 that you had seen previously. So those statistics are that I used 14.29% of my starting inventory in 2025. I decluttered 57.1% of that starting inventory. And as of 2026, I have 385.71% of where I started 2025 at. So that's fabulous. And then also of what I have in 2026, 92.59% of that was purchased in 2025. So next category is lip clicky and sticks. So those are just the ones that I named for being in a stick form, and they typically are clicky, roll up, or some form of a stick that you can utilize in that nature. In 2025, I had 9 to begin. I purchased 4 over the course of the year, and I used 2 and decluttered 0. So that left me at the beginning of 2026 with 11 remaining. The statistics for my lip clicky and sticks is that I used 22.22% of my starting inventory in 2025. I decluttered 0%. And at the beginning of 2026, my inventory is 122.22% of where I began 2025, with approximately 36.36% of all of my total being purchased in 2025. For lip masks and lip balms, as you can see, I have 47 total. So I started 2025 with 24. I purchased 31 over the course of the year. I used to completion 2 of them, and I decluttered 6. So that leaves me with 47 remaining for January 1st, 2026. So that means that I used 8.33% of my starting inventory. I decluttered 25%, and beginning 2026, I have 195.83% of that starting inventory, with 65.96% of what I own in 2026 having been bought in 2025. The final category that we're going to go over today is liquid lipsticks. So those are what are shown on the screen currently, with the caveat that I'll talk about once we get to some of the numbers. I started 2025 with 15 in total. I purchased 7 over the course of the year. I used 0 to completion, and I decluttered 4 of them. And what you'll see is that currently it says that remaining at the beginning of 2026, I have 30. And this math doesn't work, because essentially what I determined is that if a lip gloss had too high of a pigment load for me, I would rather just categorize it with a liquid lipstick. Because most of the time when I went into my specific location where I keep lip glosses, it's for something that is a topper or doesn't have a high pigment load, and I don't have to worry about moving around too much. That is why that number is so far off. And so again, that's going to make my statistics off. So for 2025, I used up 0% of my collection. I decluttered 26.67% of that starting inventory. And then again, this number is going to be off. But for 2026, I remaining have 200% of what I started 2025 with. And something that is more accurate is the fact that of that 2026 starting number, only 23.33% were actually purchased in 2025. I went ahead and moved back to the middle of the frame for the wrap up of this video. So as you can clearly see from all of my statistics, that is why I am doing a 2026 no buy. So other than maybe 2 or 3 categories, I believe every single category I pointed out today went up over the course of 2025. So again, as I've mentioned in my previous videos, I just recently got my job, which means I have more disposable income. And I found that anytime I was stressed, I immediately went to Instagram to find new things to buy, or Sephora or Ulta. That was just my safe space. And so what I'm trying to do over the course of this year is identify what I just said and find new ways as outlets for whenever things get stressful or chaotic. So I plan on not hopefully bringing too much in over the course of this year. As you previously saw, I do have a Beautylish Lucky unboxing on this channel. I will also be bringing in a few products next month for my birthday, specifically with gift cards and some money I have set aside for that. I will have a budget set aside for Black Friday just so that I can purchase some things during that time frame, because again, we're trying to go for a behavior change and not perfection. So I needed some goal to achieve and look towards in the future. So therefore, that is what Black Friday is for me, is something to look forward to, put things on a list, sit with them, let me see how they are behaving, watch some videos on other people reviewing them. And then once Black Friday rolls around, if it is something that I determine is within my budget and a want that I can sit well with, then it can be purchased. Because a lot of my issues, as you've seen with my numbers, is that I was doing a lot more purchasing on a lot more regular basis than what was an actual need. None of this is a need, but regardless, I hope you continue with me over the course of this year as I work on this behavior change and try to get as much of this collection out as I possibly can. I understand that makeup usage takes quite a while, but I do have quite a bit that I want to get through if possible, and I hope you stay with me on my journey.